Picture a scenario that plays out thousands of times a day, and I guarantee you've been exactly in this spot. You're sitting alone in a quiet room, just staring at your phone screen. You're looking at a conversation that has clearly, painfully run its course. The dynamic is completely one-sided. The energy? Flatlining. Dead. And yet, you stay right there. You keep trying to resuscitate something that brings absolutely zero value to your life. You already know how it ends, right? You know this person is giving you nothing but breadcrumbs, just enough to keep you starving. You can literally feel the slow drain of your own self-respect. But you don't walk away. You stay trapped in this brutal, endless loop of familiar disappointment. You might tell yourself you're just being incredibly patient. You might think you're demonstrating high-value loyalty. But let me hit you with the cold, undeniable truth. You're not showing loyalty at all. You are simply terrified of the empty space. You are actively choosing a known pain over an unknown possibility. To really understand why we fall into this specific trap, we have to pop the hood and look at the mechanical programming of your brain. See, your mind is basically an ancient survival engine. Its one and only job is to keep you alive. It's not necessarily designed to make you happy, fulfilled, or confident. In our ancestral environment, the unknown was literally a death sentence. Wandering into unfamiliar territory meant facing unpredictable predators. Sticking to a known environment, even if it sucked, meant you survived the night. Even if that environment was harsh, it was predictable. Because of this, your nervous system learned to crave predictability above absolutely everything else. In behavioral psychology, this primitive biological glitch is known as the status quo bias. It's a wildly powerful and, frankly, destructive neurological illusion. Your brain heavily discounts the value of your future growth and massively exaggerates the potential risk of changing things right now. This is exactly why you stay stuck in stagnant situations. Think about it. Familiar misery requires 0 new calories to process. It's easy. The unknown future, on the other hand, requires a massive, terrifying expenditure of emotional energy. Without even realizing it, you're choosing metabolic efficiency over your own dignity. When you let this biological default run your life, your internal frame completely shatters. And frame is everything. It's the absolute foundation of your reality. It's your ability to define your own boundaries and actually enforce them. A man with a genuinely strong frame never accepts a bad deal. He knows his time and his attention are his most valuable, non-refundable currencies. But a guy trapped in the status quo bias? He operates from a place of profound scarcity. He subconsciously believes he simply can't replace what he's about to lose, even if what he's losing is garbage. This deep scarcity mindset absolutely nukes his perceived social value. And trust me, the people around you can smell this quiet desperation. They know you won't leave. They realize they can toss you the absolute minimum effort and you'll gladly catch it, just to avoid feeling totally alone. Your presence goes from being a prize to be earned to a cheap, always available commodity. You essentially downgrade yourself to a background character in their chaotic movie. And it gets worse, because you also get addicted to a toxic dopamine loop of intermittent validation. A stale dynamic operates exactly like a rigged slot machine in a cheap casino. You invest massive amounts of your time, energy, and focus into the machine. 99% of the time, you get absolutely nothing in return. But then, occasionally, out of nowhere, ding! You get a tiny, unpredictable hit. You receive a basic text or a half-hearted compliment. Boom, your brain releases a sudden, massive rush of dopamine. This chemical hit tricks your mind into believing that actual progress is happening. But it's not. It traps you in a cage built entirely by your own biology. You are gambling your precious life away on a game where the house always wins. Let's drag this theory out of the textbook and into cold, everyday reality. This mental trap usually shows up in 3 highly predictable behaviors. Let's see if any of these sound familiar. The first major symptom is the obsessive preservation of dead connections. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You keep old conversations alive way past their clear expiration date. You initiate contact when you have absolutely nothing interesting to say, asking hollow, boring questions just to guarantee a basic reply. You're absolutely terrified that if you stop texting, the entire dynamic will just vanish into thin air. And guess what? You are absolutely right. It will vanish because you are the only one shoveling coal into the engine. By artificially keeping this dead connection on life support, you signal massive over-availability. You broadcast to the world that you don't have a mission of your own. Let's be real. A man with a deep purpose does not babysit silent phones. He definitely doesn't water dead plants. The second crucial symptom is the quiet, passive acceptance of weak dynamics. You enter situations where the terms are entirely dictated by the other person. They get to exclusively choose when, where, and how you engage. They alone decide the depth and the direction of the interaction. Meanwhile, you quietly swallow your deep dissatisfaction just to avoid causing friction. You convince yourself that asking for basic respect is somehow asking for too much. You rationalize their flaky, poor behavior by blaming their stress, their busy schedule, or their past trauma. Listen to me. This is a brilliant, comforting lie your fragile ego tells you. It protects you from the terrifying act of actually setting a hard boundary. By accepting a weak dynamic, you completely forfeit your walking away power. And walking away power is the only true leverage a man actually possesses. Without it, you aren't a participant. You're simply a helpless spectator in your own life. The third symptom is the endless recycling of dead hope. This is a tough one. You basically construct a pure fantasy version of a person in your head, completely ignoring the cold, hard data of their actual daily behavior. You tell yourself that things will eventually get much better. You genuinely believe that if you just endure the suffering long enough, you'll eventually be deeply rewarded. You think your quiet endurance is going to magically transform them into someone better. My friend, this is pure, unadulterated delusion. Respect is never, ever granted as a reward for lingering around like a loyal shadow. Respect is accumulated through undeniable behavioral consistency and an unbreakable internal frame. When you recycle dead hope, you are wasting your most finite resource. You're bleeding away the precious days of your life, waiting for a miracle that isn't coming. Movement feels more threatening to you than stagnation, so you choose to slowly decay. You might call it loyalty, but let's call it what it really is: paralysis. The crazy part is, society actively encourages this exact psychological weakness. The modern narrative pushes a highly toxic myth about endurance and love. Society loves to tell you that sticking around through misery somehow proves your authentic character. They romanticize the highly dangerous idea of suffering for the sake of a connection. They'll even take your sheer lack of options and label it as some kind of noble loyalty. Let's shatter this disastrous illusion right here and now. There is absolutely nothing noble about tolerating blatant disrespect. A man who constantly internalizes poor treatment isn't a hero. He's deeply weak. He forces himself to carry the heavy, toxic emotional baggage of chaotic people. He stays in the burning building just because he recognizes the furniture. Just observe the stark contrast between two totally distinct types of guys. First, look at the man who operates entirely without a solid internal core. He experiences a slight shift in someone's tone and he instantly panics. He constantly compromises his own values just to successfully avoid a confrontation. He'll literally stay in a toxic, suffocating room simply because the hallway outside looks a bit dark. Now, look at the man who has genuinely mastered his psychological boundaries. He encounters the exact same dead and unrewarding dynamic. Sure, he still feels that primitive biological pull to stay comfortable. He's human, after all. But he overrides it with pure, unshakable rational detachment. He assesses the cold behavioral data without a single drop of emotion. He realizes, hey, this situation simply does not serve my higher mission. He doesn't negotiate his worth. He doesn't write a long, complaining paragraph explaining his feelings. He simply withdraws his attention and steps boldly into the unknown. He understands a fundamental truth. The void isn't actually empty. The void is entirely full of new, massive possibilities. Look, you can't simply wish away your primitive biological fear of the unknown. And you definitely can't rely on temporary motivation to break deeply ingrained habits. You have to implement strict, unshakable practices to physically override your nervous system. Think of these safe practices as structural guardrails for your perception. They remove the emotional guesswork and replace it with pure, cold logic. The first practice is running a brutal internal audit. Next time you feel that strong urge to maintain a weak dynamic, stop. Hit the brakes. Force your mind to take a highly analytical pause and aggressively interrogate your own hidden motives. Ask yourself one specific, highly revealing question. Am I staying because this situation is actually good, or just because it's known? Demand cold, physical evidence of the good in front of you. Look for reciprocal investment and undeniable behavioral consistency. If the only real benefit you can name is familiarity, you are actively harming yourself. You must strictly separate objective reality from the tragic cinematic narrative playing in your head. The second necessary practice is creating a definitive behavioral timeline. You have to stop endlessly drifting in this ocean of vague promises. Create one concrete test for progress over the next 14 days. Define exactly what a healthy dynamic looks like in observable, physical actions. But here is the key. Do not verbally communicate this test to the other person. This is a silent internal metric purely for your own navigation. Watch their behavior closely over this precise 2-week window. Don't guide them, don't drop hints, and don't force them to meet your expectations. If the dynamic remains entirely stagnant after those 14 days, you have your final, undeniable answer. At that exact moment, you must immediately pivot your massive mental energy away from them. Cut the cord entirely. No dramatic exit speech, no ultimatums. Direct your intense focus immediately back toward the brutal friction of your own mission. Pour your resources entirely into optimizing your physical body, your skills, and your absolute competence. You have spent far too many years playing the exhausting role of the anxious placeholder. You've drained your vital energy seeking comfort in places that offer absolutely nothing in return. You genuinely believed that familiar pain was much safer than starting over. But I hope you now clearly understand the hidden mechanical gears behind this silent failure. Stagnation becomes incredibly seductive when familiarity is tragically mistaken for safety. Real maturity begins the exact moment you finally embrace the discomfort of the unknown. You are no longer a reactive pawn, terrified of losing weak connections. You now possess the cold, rational framework required to protect your internal empire. Remember this: your attention is the most valuable asset you will ever own in this life. Stop handing it out to people who offer you nothing but ghosts. The next time you face a choice between familiar misery and an empty room, I want you to pause. Will you continue to slowly decay in a comfortable, familiar cage? Or will you silently walk away, keep your unbreakable frame, and build your own empire?